All right, let's make a read. So we're going to make a new function. We're just going to call it query for quotes. And we're going to show you how you create a query, execute it, and then get the response. So it's kind of right here if you want the sneak preview. We create a query, we execute it, we get back a ticket, which is worthless, a response, and an error into a closure, right? And then we're going to check the error, and if there's a problem and there's an error, we're going to show it. And then if there's not, we're going to actually use the response to actually populate the list. And then either way, I've decided to reload the table data. And that's because where I'm going to call it from, I'm going to comment out the reload table data, and I'm just going to wait until I'm done with the query before I do the reload. So that's what we're going to go write. Maybe the sneak preview is bad, but I thought I'd just kind of show you what I'm up to here. So I'm just in this private helper methods area, going to make a new function called query for quotes. And I'll try to do it fast here, right? So we've got a query, so we're going to make a new query. This is going to be the thing we're going to send off. And the way that we make it is we're going to say GTL query movie quotes. So that's a class method we're calling. And we're going to call in that class method the query for movie quote list. If you were to type this out, where you would see it is you'd see query for movie quotes list is right here. One thing that's annoying is it returns an any object, which I find to be a giant pain how often functions return any objects. So you're actually going to have to typecast it back to being a GTL query movie quotes. So that creates the query object, and then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take the service and we're going to execute the request. You can see that there are two ways to execute a request, one with a completion handler and then one with a delegate method. We prefer the completion handlers approach because those are the ones that use closures. And what this is going to do is this is going to need a query, so it's going to just need the query that we just made, and then the completion handler. If you try to use autocomplete for this, I mean, you should be able to hit enter and it should be able to do good stuff for you. It's a little confusing, right? So it tells you that there's a service ticket, an any object, and an error. And one thing that's confusing is like, what do I type here? Do I type just the word ticket, or do I type more stuff than that? It turns out you do just type like ticket. You don't have to say the class name on it at all. I get a little confused with that sometimes, right? And then there's a response, and then there's an error. So your closure is going to get these three pieces of information. The ticket is completely worthless. That was like before you sent this request, it created a ticket. To be honest, it's something that's used under the hood that I don't really even care about. Actually, this method returns that ticket as well, which is another place I don't care about it. Response is what I care about. And then, of course, if there's an error, I have to handle that first. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say if the error is not equal to nil, then what I want to do is I want to show my error dialog and pass that error into it. Since I'm in a closure, it's yelling at me, so I have to say self.showErrorDialog, which that's why I wondered about that underscore in the name, because I hate saying self.underscore something, but you end up doing it all the time with the way closures work. And so if there's an error, I'll do that. I do choose to reload the table view even if there is an error. And the reason I do that is because if you're going to some other view controller, then you're coming back here and you did an edit just locally, right? Even if there's an error with the backend, I still want to reload the table data. Usually what I do is if there's an error, I show the dialog and then I return from the function, and it's like game over, right? And that way I don't even have to put the rest in an else function. But here I am going to use the else. Now what I want to do is I want to deal with that response. That response is an any object, which is kind of annoying, right? Really what it is it's what's called a movie quote collection. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to type the code. Oops, I had a typo in my word response up there. That's why it wasn't auto-completing very well. Response as GTL movie quote collection. The only way you know what it is that's returned, I mean, you could take my word for it, is probably the easiest thing, but you could go look it up if you wanted. And the place where you look it up is in the query movie quotes.h, and you can see query for movie quotes. It's going to fetch a movie quote collection, right? So that's how you can look it up. What's in a movie quote collection? Well, you can look that up in the .h file. It's got items, which is what you care about. This is the array. A next page token, if there are more. And that's it, right? So it's just got those two things in it. So items and a next page token. Items is an NS array of GTL movie quotes. Obviously, we're going to be doing some things in Swift, so it'll be slightly different. But we've got that collection, and now we're ready to do things with it. The first thing you need to do is you need to get the items. Now, it is possible that the items are nil, so that's probably worth checking. What I'm going to choose to do is I'm just going to say if let, I'm just going to say new movie quotes, and that is equal to movie quote collection dot items, and I'm going to say as question mark because it might be nil, so I don't know if we've used as question mark before, but it's just a way to cast something where the thing might be nil, right? And I'm going to cast it to be a GTL, an array of GTL movie quotes. Cool, and so that is what I've got. That way, just in case there are no movie quotes, it won't crash. It'll just do nothing, right? So if it exists, set it as the new movie quotes. Then what I've got to do is I've currently got my internal array. I'm just going to do the simplest thing I can. I'm just going to set it right there. And then one thing you could do is, just put a to-do. I'll just say check for more via the page token. So I'll just kind of list that as a little to-do. I'm actually kind of anxious to run this thing because it should actually do something now. So what I want to do first is I'm going to say localhost testing false. And so this should point to my backend, Fisher DS, movie quotes. And it might be working, but I'm not calling the method yet. That's okay. I need to go call the method. And so in view will appear, instead of just reloading the table, what I want to do is I want to actually do a query for quotes. So if I run it now, there's still a lot more I need to improve, but I was really anxious to see this thing show up. And presto, I've got some quotes, which is really cool. They're in no particular order, so if I go look at my movie quotes backend, these will probably not be the top 10 quotes. You will notice that there's only 10 because 10 is the default limit. So I'm going to do some things with the limit. So there's still some improvements that I want to make. Before I go in and make improvements, though, one thing I'd like to switch it over to is I'd like to switch it over to localhost testing true. And I'd like to make sure I've got a back end spun up for localhost. So I did have it up, but then I must have lost it. So I spun it up with Eclipse. And then I can go to localhost here, and I can see that I've got some things in here, none of which are useful. And I'm going to run it with localhost testing true and see if I can get those quotes. Oops, and mine crashed and burned, and I know why. It's because I said HTTPS for localhost, and you can't do that, right? So I got this SSL error because I was trying to use HTTPS to localhost. So make sure you change that to ATTP. I make these errors to help you learn, right? And so now I switched it to HTTP, and things work just fine then, right? So I've got these quotes on my localhost web client, and then I've got the same quotes over here. Again, notice that there's no particular order to these things. Let's go fix some things. We'll start with the order. So in order to fix the order, we just need to set on the query the order object. And then this is kind of annoying. I'm going to need to type out the last touch date time. It's negative because I want newest on top. Make sure you do type that right with whatever you set in your message field schema. I'm pretty sure that's right. You could also set things like the limit. So if I want to set the limit to say 30, then I'd see more quotes. If I ran this with localhost, you're not going to see a tremendous change because, I guess you'll see the order will actually be preserved. So you can see it says same task, localhost, and then my other nonsense. But if you run it with the deployed version, at least if you run it with my deployed version, you'll see a lot more quotes since you set the limit to 30, right? So now I can see that there's a lot of quotes here, and the order should be the same as my deployed backend. So there's my deployed backend, and I can see that now I've got all these things showing up, and there are actually 30 of them. There's a couple other improvements that we're going to make, but just for the sake of trying to make small chunks, we've got a lot done here, right? So we've actually done our first real query. We've made some minor improvements to it, and that we've set the limit, and then we've also set the order. There are other little improvements. I guess I'll do most of these next time, but there are things like UI application, shared application, network activity indicator visible true that I like to do. So basically, if you set it true initially, and then on the inside you set it to false, it'll show a little spinner. Another thing we should probably do is we should also set that initial query complete flag to be true. So I'll go ahead and do those things in this video. They're just little touches to make it look better. Now you have to be really fast with your eyes to see it actually say loading movie quotes, and it was gone. And there was a little spinner up here. Hopefully your network connection is slower than mine, and you'll actually see that network activity indicator, and hopefully you'll see the loading message, and then it'll go away. By the way, this little equals true is a good test to do for local host testing. So if you do local host testing and you run it, and you have quotes, it'll actually just show the quotes. But with local host testing, if you wanted to, you could actually come in here and you could just delete all the quotes, and then you'll have none. So here, I'll delete the last one. And then if I run it, note I can't refresh it, I have to just rerun it. If I run it now, it'll say no movie quotes because it finished that query, and then afterwards it says no movie quotes. And if your eyes were fast, it would have said loading and then no movie quotes. All right, so we started to do our first real back-end communication. We'll pick it up next time with an improvement so that we can get all the quotes from the back end instead of just our limit of 10 or 30. See you then.